My name is Barry Sykes. I'm an artist and I'm involved with the Radical Essex programme.
Tell us a bit about yourself, Barry. How did you get interested in nudism in particular?
The thing that piqued my interest was I saw that Radical Essex had been, on their Instagram, had been putting lots of images out about their research, really nice way of just circulating quickly a lot of the information they'd been digging up. They just put up a picture, which they've recently kind of Instagrammed in relation to my talk. It's very hard to get the provenance of this image, as you'll come to understand. It is literally just a black and white photo of three people sort of horsing around in a field, piggybacking, naked. It's been cited as an image of people in one of these, in the Tolstoy anarchist colony in Wickford, which was really my entry point. Like, okay, that all sounds really interesting. What on earth is going on there? I've never even heard of it being from Essex. So it's sort of a bit of the, why don't I know about this? Want to do a bit more digging, and then thinking about those, and then my interest in what is it about this sort of social community that Scandinavia is so happy with? What is it about these ideas about hermits and retreating into the landscape and that sort of thing? They're all kind of tied together. So it led to me realising, okay, hang on, there's a timeline. Actually, doing more research myself, I can see that, right, this Wickford Tolstoy colony, there was also another one in Purley in Essex. They're sort of set up in the late 1800s, 1890s, inspired by some literature that Tolstoy, some very, very interesting and odd literature that Tolstoy was writing at the end of his life. He abandoned the fame and celebrity, or turned his back on the fame and celebrity that his fiction novels, War and Peace, Anna Karenina, all that sort of stuff had got him, and began doing some real serious soul searching about what is the life well spent, what's his faith, what is existence, what is the decision to go on each day. And wrote a number of these treatises, one of which is called A Confession, which I've taken as the title of my talk. These books inspired a lot of people who I think were kind of troubled with their position in a sort of increasingly industrialised, developing society of the late 1800s. And so, yeah, the more digging I did into that, I was sort of tracing this timeline from them to this early, what is seen as cited as the first naturist club colony in the country, which was very close to that Wickford colony in Essex, called Moonella, which is a bit of a mystery in itself due to the anonymity of the participants. And then you can trace that through kind of peaks and troughs of popularity to the three existing naturist clubs in Essex at the moment. Oakwood is the one I've been visiting just outside Brentwood, in the kind of shadow of the M25, literally a hedgerow from the hard shoulder of the M25. And then there's a couple of other ones. There's one called Arcadians near Billericay and Springwood, I believe, in Colchester. But luckily Oakwood were very open and keen and interested. And then I've been back a couple of times since. Interestingly, the last time I went, it was about a month ago. It was too cold. It was rather chilly, and everyone was there fully clothed. Sort of the more I talk to them, you realise it's essentially more about the social life and the contact. Of course, if the clouds clear and the sun's rays start beating down, then more than likely everyone will be sort of peeling off the layers again. But otherwise, it's really very much about sort of the benefits of long-standing friendships, closing a heavy gate behind you and leaving the world outside, and maybe sort of the simplicity of a book and a chair and a view of tended landscape without Wi-Fi or mobile phones or cameras or whatever.
Yeah. Is there any link to the original founding Tolstoy groups?
As far as I can gather, no, and everyone I've mentioned it to is completely oblivious to the Tolstoy colonies. So, but when I start talking about Sunbeam, which was a naturist club in the 60s that seemed to be the direct heir of the Moonella club that was only run in the 20s, people are more familiar and say, I used to know someone who went to that club. So I sort of think there is a 6 degrees of separation. Someone at the club, Oakwood club that I've been visiting, probably went to the Sunbeam club. Someone from that Sunbeam club would probably overlapped and gone to the Moonella club, and it seems like someone from the Moonella club could well have also been a member of the Tolstoy colony over 100 years ago. that's supposition, but just judging by the way these geographies and timelines overlap a bit, and also the interest, there's never been, from what I can gauge, if this is something that's clicked in you, that you realise, the sort of enjoying time in the sun and in the landscape naked around with other people is something that you really enjoy and relish.
We don't know why they came to Essex either, do we?
Well, the interesting thing that seems to be a theme of one of the themes of the whole Radical Essex season is that there was a lot of space. Essex wasn't as developed as other counties. Essex kind of offered enough space to experiment with these sorts of things, really, unlike any other home county, any other sort of space within easy reach of London. So due to that proximity, you could easily get out to it, and also the coast too. So it offered it sort of had perhaps a sense of escape to it. So there's a lot of space, there was a lot of area to experiment, and also then whatever you were trying to set up would have a lot of land around it, so you kind of get on with things. It's a very kind of frugal, understandably, sort of, in some ways necessarily frugal, because there's not a lot of money moving around these coasts, but equally you sort of feel like it's something that's taken, some of that frugality is almost the point, and the simplicity. It's you only, it takes very little. There's very little paraphernalia needed, if you get my meaning, to take part in that sort of activity. But the beauty of it, you might say.
Well, that all feeds back into the Tolstoy philosophy.
Exactly.
This is all part of the, your talk is part of the Radical Essex programme. How radical would it have been when those Tolstoy colonies set up?
Well, in terms of the climate, you can imagine we're talking still pretty much Victorian attitudes then. For it to be mixed sex nudity, I mean, you might have, I'm gathering that if you did swimming lessons as a kid in that era, you'd be doing it naked anyway, in gender segregated groups, if you were going to pop down to a lake or a pond or whatever. But to be mixed sex nudity would have been counter to most things, to most kind of the attitudes of civilized society of that era. Interestingly, there was this kind of, through things like the German, I think it's Freikorper culture, is it? Which is sort of free body culture. Again, the way things were doing things, people were doing things differently in other nearby countries. That was much more about the promotion of the health benefits of the naked outdoor athletic lifestyle, running around, sun worship, swimming, very active, all very much like this is exercise as well as appreciating your body and nature, which was then the victim of, in Germany, the rise of fascism put paid to that. That was completely frowned upon, even though, you had the kind of sporting prowess of the Aryan youth and things like that. The Freikorper culture societies were absolutely stamped on in that rise. But there was a kind of, prior to that, there was a sort of heyday of it, but I've not quite got my head around how that related to the sort of broader culture, whether it may have been more popular but still more segregated. What just doing an activity out of the way of prying eyes, even for your own benefit, has a great sort of power.
Yeah.
And I'm also aware that this is for myself, a confession is the title taken from the Tolstoy book, talking about his kind of feelings and anxieties and whatever, and I've sort of taken it as this sort of one, grounding it in this subject matter in the Tolstoy history, but also it does feel a little bit risky, kind of talking about this stuff publicly and putting my name to it. There are different attitudes in how people respond to this sort of thing, and I have weirdly, I've gone through this sort of through different instances in Oakwood Club, and also as I say, in these other residences, artist kind of projects I've done, longer trips to Scandinavia and Germany and whatever. I've already sort of had to cross the threshold of coping with mixed sex, communal, non-sexual nudity, if you like. That I'm a bit further down the line, and what is it to be in? That's kind of it is slightly an odd space to be in, to be less bothered about that sort of stuff than other people, because it's sort of seen as a little bit odd. So I'm aware that there's that. The confession is also mine in terms of the subject matter I'm currently working with, which I'm aware or perhaps I'm being oversensitive with.
Well, it's interesting you talk
People
about
can have a
confessional.
reaction to, you know.
I mean, the thing about confessional is there is that sort of biblical Genesis account where Adam and Eve are naked.
Oh, exactly. Yes.
Until they commit a sin, and then once they become sinful, they become aware of their nakedness and cover themselves up.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. In fact, that image is. I've thrown that image into my PowerPoint as well. But yeah, no, it's true. And I mean, the interesting thing, what I thought you were going to say was confession in religion as well, because actually a lot of it's funny that the Tolstoy writing is he's wrestling with not wanting to be interested in organised religion, but keeps coming back to the sort of tenets of religion, of Christianity, of doing the right thing, of respecting other people, of kind of thinking of a greater good than yourself. That oddly, this kind of usefulness, trying to gauge the usefulness of organised religion is weirdly kind of abiding with it. With this sort of, it's a common thing to the roots of these sorts of ideas. But yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, you're right. Kind of shame. This isn't the shame of the human body is not a Victorian. Does not start with the Victorians. It does go back a long way. So yeah, and it's a really interesting one, really, why that is the case and what can be. I mean, there's been some fascinating conversations I've had with people at the club who've got so much out of spending this time, sort of generally once a week, in this space where they can strip everything away, you know, and it really does work mentally as well as physically as they do it. You know, what can be gained from that? You know, there's a bit of me that sort of may come across as promoting the. I mean, I think I do have an arm's length to it, and I'm not. I'm sort of seeing it from both sides, an outsider, and now through visits, a bit more of an insider. But yeah, people talk about it very evangelically as to what it can offer.
You know, a common theme from his sort of edited version of the Gospels was this idea of going into the. Well, it's not his idea, but it's Jesus going into the wild, into the wilderness, cutting self off and being at one, alone.
Yeah.
I don't know. You sort of alluded to that in a way when you were talking earlier about society and about locking yourself behind these gates and things, which is perhaps.
And I have a. Yes.
Sorry.
I was chipping in just because lots of thoughts were bubbling up there about the kind of. I'm also a bit ambivalent about that too. You know, I do fall for the romance of that gesture, of that kind of losing yourself in the landscape, and obviously, you know, we've all, you know, a quiet walk on your own can be incredibly kind of nourishing, and we all know that kind of, we do need, as much as you need people, solitude is a very important kind of psychological state, and how you process things and all that sort of stuff. But my interest in is it because it can so quickly turn into some form of sort of low-level misanthropy and kind of shunning society, and how constructive that is, really. There's a interesting article I've been reading it was in the New Yorker a few years ago, but in response to Walden, the Henry David Thoreau kind of key set text, if you like, about retreating into the wilderness, that he built this cabin in the woods of Massachusetts and lived there, a simple life, living off the land, and it's seen as this kind of empirical text on how you can live that simple life, and you know, there's lots of motivational quotes taken from it and that sort of thing, living with a purpose. But equally, it's someone who shuns other people, who can't really get on with other people and the rest of society, and that's not necessarily a constructive thing to be either. You know, I'm not trying to take a moral position, but it's interesting to see that one extreme of either is potentially quite destructive.
Yeah, this comes back to one of your themes, hermits, doesn't it? Is it one of your themes?
Yeah. You know, I don't think, you know, what is. There's bits of I recognise there's bits in my, you know, I'm sat here in my studio alone, as I've been all day and have been most of the week, and I take, you know, that kind of pottering around in this room of my own is something I take a lot of pleasure in, but equally, you know, you have to go back and get contact with other people again, thankfully, and that has its own pleasures. But going too far down one way takes you into for too much time is, known to be a kind of psychologically risky proposition. So not to over-dramatise the kind of, what the benefits of a country walk, but that, you can idealise that kind of retreat into nature, and equally it's a fraught proposition, especially when we might all want to be trying to construct a better society of living together, which is essentially what Tolstoy was trying to do and was part of those various movements around that time that were trying to do that. But if you keep finding running away from it all as the only solution, then there's something perhaps wrong there.